Hey everybody, thanks for coming to the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to show a retrofit for HID projectors onto this 1999 Toyota Corolla. It applies from 98 to 2000, generation 8. In this scene you can see how the LEDs that I tried before the HID retrofit were flickering. They caused the stereo to whine, the light was scattered. Typical LED conversion didn't work. So that's why I made this video, to show you how to do the HID projector retrofit. The first thing I did was bought a spare headlight housing pair. And I didn't know which brand to get, so I just got the ones that'd be here fastest, which was the NiLight brand. And ultimately, they were sealed permanently. It wasn't even perma-sealed, it was literally glued, and they didn't work well. But I made it work. It was just a big pain in the butt, and it didn't look good. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably select a brand like TYC, a little more expensive, or maybe the Spider brand. They're probably going to have a seal that's removable versus the NiLight brand, and I'll talk about that later in the video, but you're just kind of on your own as far as finding the right ones that are going to be easy to open and you can put back together. One thing I did not cheap out on was the projectors. I didn't want to cheap out on that because it's permanent and you don't want to look back on something like that and have any regrets. Get the ACME or Morimoto projectors. Don't cheap out. I'll put links below in the description for you. And on a side note, I have another video where I show you how to install these air horns from Horn Blasters. As I said, the housings are the same for the 98 to 2000. Here's all the parts that I bought, including those NiLight housings, which I ultimately didn't like. The existing lights are by Eagle Eye, and I'll put a link below. The main component is the projector, and I used an ACME Bi-xenon for H1 bulbs. They were $36 for the pair, and they're a 2.5 inch projector. They fit inside the housings. You need a projector shroud to cover up the projectors. I got the Morimoto Gatling gun 2.5 inch. Ended up having to modify them anyway because they were too big for the housing at the bottom. I just used a Dremel to cut them, and they were about 15 bucks for the pair. You need a harness that acts as an interface between your original Corolla bulbs, which are H4s, and the H1 style. And this is a Morimoto MOTOCONTROL harness, Bi-xenon relay. And it fits a Corolla. It's about 38 bucks. And it only connects to one of the headlight connectors on your car. To run the HID bulbs, you need the ballast, and this is an ACME Speedy Start 35 watt. It was $61 for the pair of them. And the bulbs are ACME HID 5000K. They were $20 a pair. Going over this list, after I've done some of the work already, I'm going to insert it here at the beginning of the video. Tell you my experiences with these before you buy the stuff. These mini moto holders by Morimoto, I used them, but they're very weak and they don't line up with the bolts very well on the ACME. In fact, one of the tabs broke off because it's pretty cheap plastic, irregardless of how strong they say it is. So you can either take those or leave them. They're 27 bucks, and I don't think they were worth that much for how weak they were and how they didn't line up. The retro rubber butyl resealing glue Morimoto, that I'm ending up not using because it turned out that the headlights that I had were permanently sealed with glue, not the typical butyl. So do not get this brand, the NiLight, on Amazon. It was the cheapest one, of course. The original headlights, these are Eagle Eyes, and you can see they have the clips, which I'm guessing that they're probably the slightly better, not the Permaseal. They're probably the butyl, but they are gray. So I'd probably go with Eagle Eye brand if you can't find OEM on that. And I will have a link to the Eagle Eyes in the description. I haven't tried to unseal these with the oven, but I did try with this brand and it didn't work, and it cost me hours. Back to the Bi-xenon relay control, MOTOCONTROL. That is the controller that goes from the bulb ballast, which is the ACME Speedy Start, to your headlight plugs. That would be this unit right here. And you can see it connects to the ballast, to your high beam input on your new projector. And then it's got a ground and a power, which is just battery. So that's it's like a mini controller that goes to the Speedy Ballast by ACME. And then that goes to the bulb here. So we'll go over that on the installation. The bulbs, I got the H1 ACME HID 5000K, and they were pretty cheap. The HID bulbs are pretty inexpensive, and you get any kind of color you want. As I said, I got the 35 watt ACME Speedy Start ballast, 2 of those. The mini Gatling guns. Okay, so here's the deal on those. That's the shroud that goes around the projector, this thing right here. And what I ran into is the Corolla headlight is so narrow that if you try to put this thing inside, you're gonna have to modify the bottom so that the projector doesn't mount pointing up, because then you can't adjust anything. So think about that when you order the shroud. Try to get the thinnest one possible. This one sticks up quite a bit, but that's what I bought, and you can modify it. The Bi-xenon ACME standard H1 projectors. So the first thing we do is prep the headlight housings to be separated, so that we put them in the oven, get it heated up, and we pull them apart. Here's some pictures of the parts on the NiLight housings. They're pretty brittle, and I ended up breaking a couple of tabs. Overall, they were a very brittle component, and so you had to be really careful with them. That's why I recommend trying a different brand, because I broke a few things, but ultimately ended up making it work. Preparing these things to go in the oven so that you can pull the lens off. You can soften the sealant there to pull the lens off. You're gonna pull all the rubber parts off, anything that might be more susceptible to cracking or melting. So these guys here, these adjusters, we can just push on this with a flathead. This thing will pop right out. And then this one's got screws right here with these plastic pieces. You unscrew that, and then this one up here on top, it just pops out too. So we're just gonna remove these screws with a screwdriver. Some of the manufacturers use a screwdriver or a Phillips head here. This one's got a 10mm bolt. You got to remove that one first in order to get the to the screws. Some of these parts can be brittle, so you got to be kind of careful. But this one right here, you push up on it a little bit, and then you can pop it back, and then it releases. And that way, you can get access over here on this other screw. Right in there. I already removed that one, but still got this one left, so we'll go after that one next. So one thing I'm going to warn you about is that I'm sure the OEMs were better than these. This one I noticed is already cracked right there on the edge. So there's also some sealant in there. And so you may have to decide whether or not you want to put this thing all together in the oven with all this stuff on it or not. I would definitely remove the rubber cap and probably, I don't know, this stuff probably hold up okay in the oven, but I'm gonna remove it because I've already done it and I know I can remove this. This one here just has the tab here on this side and then one on that side. You just push down on them and kind of push back on this little piece where it pops out. So I used the Retro Resource recommendation for 270 at 7 minutes. So we're gonna go ahead and throw these in. This one I actually left this bracket on to see what would happen since they're a cheap set. All right, they're out of the oven, 270 degrees. Gonna use a little protection. So I have a plethora of pry tools here. These are motorcycle tire spoons. I can't pick them up with a hand. And then these are like, that one's a bicycle tire spoon or tire lever. And then a couple of these extra little plastic things. I'm gonna try and just get a tool in there and try and start opening it up best I can. Once I get it going, then I'll just keep going. So just right there in one of the larger gaps, just kind of try to pop it open there. I gotta use both hands. So I had to throw the other one back in the oven for a little while because the sealant wasn't loose enough. So I'm working on this other one that I had pulled out originally with these two tire levers. This is why I stress getting the right housings. Go with the TYC or the Eagle Eye housings. Video to be twice as long as it should have been, and it was complete fail until I had to cut them. So this is how I'm hoping that you'll learn from my experience. Here you might even be able to see some of the damage that was caused by trying to pry them apart, where the housing just didn't hold up to the prying. All right, so fast forwarding to the next day. Yesterday, after the oven was a complete failure, I put these things in at the temperature and time that I told you I did, and then I couldn't break this thing apart at all. So I put it in again, let it sit longer, still couldn't get any kind of a gap on this stuff. Ultimately, these things are permanently sealed with some kind of glue. It could be permaseal, but I'm guessing it's some cheaper Chinese version. But ultimately, I had to cut these things, and I've never cut them before, and there's plenty of videos out there on it. And you can see there's a little damage here, but you know what? This car it's got 182,000 miles on it. It's just a commuter. So this is gonna work for me. I'm gonna seal them up, and they're gonna work just fine. So, you know, I've still got the pieces that I broke off in there. That was using a Dremel. This guy right here with a cutting bit. So that's what you resort to. And then, so that was the one that I did on the first one here, and it was pretty sloppy. I got some cuts in there. Once you get the lens on, I don't think you're gonna be able to see all the stuff. The second one I did turned out much better. No chunks missing, a lot cleaner. And what I used on that one was the oscillating tool. This is just Harbor Freight, but you can use any kind of a oscillating tool. But that one worked a lot better because once I got past the lens, you could feel it bump, like it would break free and you could feel it and you could pull back out again. So that worked a lot better. With the Dremel, you're spinning that blade, it's constantly melting stuff and you can't really feel it break through. So I'd go with an oscillating tool. Like I said, there's a lot of videos out there on YouTube about cutting these headlights open, and that's where most of the guys go, is with the oscillating tool. So one thing I hate to do is make a really unorganized video, and this is unfortunately turning out to be one of them simply because I couldn't get the oven to break this glue loose, and I had to cut them. And by that time it was late at night and I didn't feel like making the video, so I had to blast through it. And I made a lot of mistakes, and that's the reason I make these videos, is because a lot of these projects, it's my first time. I'm able to show you what beginners make mistakes on so that you don't have to make these mistakes and you can learn from mine. Now, being a specific Toyota Corolla 1999 video, this is specific to this car. So this is going to help you more than it would be somebody with a 9th generation or a 7th generation Corolla or Camry or whatever. You're going to need a trim removal tool, just like this set here. It's great for all the cars. You can remove door panels, hood, panel connection inserts. I mean, there's all sorts of parts there that you can remove with that. Links are down below. You need a Phillips 10mm, and we'll get started. First thing we're going to do is remove these 10mm bolts. And I was able to actually remove these headlights over here before to put the LEDs in, which were a big fail. Without doing this, I was able to pop this off and take the side marker off and then get to it and pull it out. But you risk damaging these adjusters. So today, since we're pulling the whole thing out and we're going to replace these adjusters, I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the grill here. That gives us a little more room to work. A little trim removal tool here for this guy. Pop that up. That one came out easy because it's so loose, but anyway, you can kind of see how this pops this up. You guys probably already know this. A lot of you guys have already done all this stuff. Go ahead and take the side marker off. Just a little Phillips right here. And just pops straight out. There's a couple of clips that it just pops out of. I don't know if you can kind of see the one here that slides in that way. There's also one in the back that slides in that way as well. We're just going to put this off to the side since we don't need to mess with it. You got a 10mm right here. Remove this one right here. There's another one right down in there. You can see that we have to pull out, just right there. So next, right down in there, you can kind of see there's another little stud actually that slips right through a slot right here. So you just pull this over to the right. So obviously a very loose plug. Thing came right out. So anyway, that's what it looks like. And now I'll show you how to take all the components off. So this is how the original and the replacement housings look when you first get them. They got this little rubber boot. You peel that off, and then you have access to the screws on the back that have the retaining clips. And you can see the screws right here. And the bulb is also there, which they didn't come with a bulb, but I've got the LED bulb in there that I bought hoping it would work, and it just scattered light everywhere. So anyway, pull all those screws out. Once you do that, you've got the little shield in there that comes loose, and once you get the lens off, you can pull it out from the front. Next thing you're going to do is just pull the bulb out. I hang on to this stuff just in case the projectors go out. I can put the originals back in. So swing the clip out, pull the LED bulb out, or whatever you have. You probably have halogen still. So earlier when I was showing you the individual components on these things, you saw the projector without the shroud on, and you saw the shrouds by themselves, all that sort of thing. One thing to note that I didn't know before was the actual little shield that pops up. You can kind of see it in there. It's a magnetically controlled little piece of metal that just pops up to go to high beam. And it's controlled by these two wires here, which will connect to your controller if it's Morimoto or whatever. That will send the signal for the high beam to pop that thing up and let all the light go through all the projector versus just the top part, which shines down. If you look back here, you can see there's a little retaining nut on there. There's a washer that fits H4 bulb slots, which is this one right here. The kit came with another conversion piece right here, which I'm not exactly sure what size that is. It might actually just be an H1. I don't know. But there's a metal washer, there's a rubber washer, and then there's the there's that aluminum nut. So what you do first is you're going to modify the shroud. Don't put the projector in before you modify the shroud, and I'll show you that. So I apologize in advance that I didn't show you the modification on the shroud as I was doing it, but it's pretty self-explanatory. The bottom of this projector, the mechanism, you can kind of see it in there just a little bit. It hits almost, it's about 1 millimeter or 2 away from the bottom of this headlamp. And if you put the shroud on there as is, you won't be able to mount it straight. It's going to be pointed up. It'll be all cockeyed. So you have to use a Dremel and cut out basically a portion like this, out to right about even with that line right there. So cut out from this line back, but first note where the bottom is, because there's 4 bolts, and God, I wish I would have showed you this before, but there's basically 4 screw holes on the back of the shroud, and it only fits one way on these ACME projectors. There's holes on the ACME projector, 1, 2, 3, 4. That a bolt can come in on the back side and screw onto this projector, and there are literally, it only fits one way on the back of this thing. So once you get the parts, you'll figure it out, and then you test fit it in there, and you'll say, oh well, this part here, which is actually down here, is gonna push up, it won't fit. So that's how you know how much to grind off back in there. You can kind of see the grinding job. It's kind of half-assed, but nobody's going to see it when you're looking at this angle. But I wanted to let you know that, because this is specific to this headlight and this reflector and how much room it's got. Okay, so once you've modified your shroud, you can see in there I've got that little rubber, actually it's a big rubber washer for the H4 size versus the small one. So that one, the big one goes in there like that, and then the big version of this washer goes on the back side here. You can kind of see it fits perfectly in these slots. Try to zoom out, give you a big overview there. And then once you got that on, you've got your nut right here. And this stuff, I think, is aluminum, so it's real easy to strip. You got to be really careful with it. I managed to do it, so I'm sure you can. And then when you're tightening it, note that this Morimoto bulb holder is not going to be there. Just remember that. That's not supposed to be there right now when I'm teaching you or showing you this. So that won't be in the way. And you can get a big socket and tighten this down, or you can even use a pair of pliers. But when you're tightening it down, make sure you're pushing on the projector, pushing it back hard to squish that rubber washer down as you're tightening. So one hand over here, tool over here, pushing and tightening. And you know, don't break it, but just make sure it's snug and that thing won't flop around anymore. So before you did that, it's pretty obvious you just run these 2 wires through that little hole that's already existing on the back of the headlight housing here. And this came with, I believe it was the bulb kit, this little housing here. And these 2 wires were just bare, just hanging out, and they had a couple of grommets here on the back. Those weren't in there, so it was just bare wires with 2 leads inside. You can see those, but this black housing was not attached. And I figured it out that in order to use this is your high beam lead. It triggers that little door that pops up and down. You have to convert this over to female and hook it up to the Morimoto controller, and that's what sets off the high beams. Okay, and then the Morimoto bulb holders are like right here. You just screw those in. These Morimoto bulb holders, they don't line up on the ACME perfectly, so remember that. It's your choice. They're like 27 bucks, and I don't know if they're worth it, but I bought them and made them work anyway. This one actually went okay, tightened up just fine. And then this little retaining thing goes over the bulb when it goes in there, and then this little nut, retainer nut, goes over that, holds the bulb secure. Otherwise, you're going to be using this hardware here, which comes with the kit and has a little retaining spring. So your choice, just a little more money. And I broke that one on there, but it's still pretty solid. So I can always go back to the old school retainer if I want to. Another thing, before you put this little shroud on here, these wires are bare. And you take a 9-volt battery and you just touch it positive to positive, negative to negative. And they say you want to test these things like 40 times. I did maybe 30, and it activated the little shield that many times just to make sure that it's working, because you don't want to run around with, you know, inability to use your high beams before you seal this whole thing up. All right, we're going to remove the other side just like we did that side. So complete that step. So now that we've got both the stock headlights out, we're ready to put the new projectors in without the lenses on. You can see here the lens is not on yet. One thing you want to make sure is you put the bulb in before you mount these things, because this one's a real pain in the ass to get to behind. So put the bulb in before that. And yes, we're going to remove these back out again to seal the lenses, but for now we want to plug everything in, make sure it works before we seal up the lens. So I'm going to stick the bulb in the back side of that one since I already mounted it. That's another lesson. Put the bulb in before you put these mounted, otherwise it's a pain. Okay, so we got our bulbs in, and just to note, you're not going to use this part, at least not with the parts that I have right now. This is the high beam lead that comes out the back of the headlight housing. The reason is that there's already dedicated wires, these guys right here, that are going to operate your the relay in there that moves that high beam up and down. So what we're going to do is hook up the ballast. This is the ACME Speedy Start ballast that I bought, to the leads here coming out of the back off the bulb. Just plug those in like this. Pretty self-explanatory. A lot of this stuff is, if you just look at it. And then we're going to do the other side the same way. Next thing we're going to do is hook up the controller here. And again, I'm just doing this so that we can test the system to make sure that I'm ready to seal up the lenses. So we got to plug this into one of the existing headlight plugs right here, the OEM one. And I'm going to do it over on this side close to the battery is where I'm going to mount all this stuff, since you do have a battery lead that goes on there. So plug this into your existing headlight here. This guy right here, plug that in first. Next, I got my high beam hookup. Plug that in to the back of the bulb, back of the housing. You've got your ballast plug off the Morimoto. It goes to your actual ballast. And then you've got a ground, which we're gonna mount over here on this side here in a second. This is not used, that's your ACME high beam control leads, but we're not using those. For testing purposes, I just decided to hook up both the ground leads onto where my horn mounts here. That's just good enough for now, and the eyelets or terminals are big enough to do that, to fit around that 12mm bolt. So we'll do that for testing. Your power wire and lead comes with a fuse holder here and a fuse in it. Pull the fuse out first before you hook up the power to the battery. It's funny how much more crap can I hook onto this battery. Got the horn, PA system. Now I'm gonna have these lights on here. The alarm's probably gonna go off. That's what really sucks. Cool, I managed to put that on there without setting the alarm off. So there's two reasons why I want to do this, maybe three, I don't know. Why I want to test it out without having it all mounted and sealed up. Number one is to make sure all the components work. If they don't work, then I can throw the old headlights back in and still drive it. Once I confirm that they do work, then I can pull everything back off, seal up the housings with the lenses, and be on my way. And then, you know, totally rewire, clean it all up. And the last reason is I want to know for sure if I have the amount of adjustment available with the way these things are mounted. If I can't put them down low enough and people are going to be flashing me all day long, then, you know, all of this is pretty much for nothing. And I'll probably have to take everything apart, reshim, you know, the housing, the projector, and maybe trim a little bit off the shroud. So let's see what happens. So you know what really helps is if you put the fuse back in. I've done this so many times where I've turned stuff on and it's like, oh shit, it doesn't work. And then you're like, oh, the fuse wasn't in. So there's the fuse. Let's try it again. Say a little prayer. Damn. It actually came on. Well, that's good. Good sign. And as far as beam goes, they're lower than the beams that I had on with the LEDs in there. So that's good. There's a nice good cutoff. I know you can't see it right now. I'll show you later. But yeah, they're low enough. So I'm going to see if I can aim them up a little higher just to be sure that I can get them high enough. I'm also going to test. Ooh, they're really warmed up now. I'm also going to test the high beam. So here goes the high. Yep, that works. Okay. All right, everything's working. They are adjustable, so now I got to pull everything, well, at least the two housings out, and we'll get to sealing everything back up. Like I was saying, we've got our high beam control wires right here, so we don't need this, which was included on the actual bulb. So we're going to go ahead and snip this thing right here and then pull these wires out because we don't need those. But hang on to all this stuff just in case you want to resplice something later. So now you can see we just have two wires going into the grommet for the bulb power, and then the two wires here for the high beam controller. So once I figured out that we couldn't do the oven trick where we split everything apart and then just put it back together with the rubber, I started doing some research on how we're going to reseal these things, and people said you can melt the lens plastic on there around the edges and then put silicone around it, and that's going to be my plan. You can either use a soldering iron. I happen to have this basically giant soldering iron. It's a Tread Doctor for motorcycles, and it's got kind of a little blade on there that's super hot, a lot bigger than a soldering iron. I think it'll help in doing this whole procedure. It's a good idea to take the time to use a microfiber and wipe off the fingerprints that you just put all over these things before you seal them up. Been handled a lot. And just one last check to make sure everything's solid. You can kind of see if the housing is solid in there and the projector's solid. So I know I didn't show you how to cut. I just showed you what tools I used, but basically there's a lip here on this lens, and I just went behind the lip and just zipped in there until I felt it break free, which meant that I was up against the housing, and that's when I would stop. So the Dremel caused a lot of garbage on the edges here, so you can kind of scrape that off before you try to seal this thing back up. And another thing about this brand that I chose, the NiLight, when these things were heated up, this lens was really soft, and it was like I couldn't even really pry it off without it deforming. So I definitely would not go with this brand again. Like I said, it's just very weak. And then also these housings, it almost seemed like they were more of a fiberglass rather than a plastic. They were very brittle. Another thing I'm going to say is, remember, this is a $2,000 commuter car that I bought so I could preserve my truck. Thing's got 188,000 miles on it, or 182. So these are going to work. I just wanted to be able to see at night when I'm driving. And so obviously the quality of this install is not typical of what I would expect on a newer vehicle or anything like that. I'm just showing you the process. You might have a show car that this totally wouldn't work for you, and you would just scrap the whole thing or the whole project and move on to something a little nicer. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm just plastic welding around the edges using the lens, melting the lens material. And then once I get it at least secured, then I'll go back over it with silicone. Hope this works, because this housing material feels like and smells like fiberglass when it's cut or melted, and fiberglass doesn't weld to plastic that great. So hopefully this goes well. All right, so this one's done. I think it took me about 40 minutes to go around it. I went around twice just to make sure that it was all solid. Yeah, it's ugly. I mean, I'll probably take the Dremel sanding drum to it, clean it up before I put the silicone on it. Or maybe I won't. I mean, you know, once the hood's closed and it's all bolted down, nobody's really gonna see. Yeah, they'll probably see the top, so I'll probably sand that one down. But anyway, it's gonna be functional, and like I said, it's a beater car, but I'm gonna see really good at night. So we've got the headlights resealed with the plastic welding method, I guess you could call it. And now I'm just gonna take some high-powered clear silicone like this and just put it around the welds as a backup so that it'll be sealed. All right, folks, that's it. This wiring job is ugly. I got kind of in a rush today. Today's Halloween, and I was expected to be responsible tonight, so I had to finish this thing up quickly, but I might change the wiring around. Basically, I've got the ballast back here. A few zip ties, please forgive me for the ugly. I ran the wire right across here, and then there's the Morimoto. For now, it's just kind of wedged because it says to mount it upright, but there's literally nowhere in here to mount upright where the wire will reach all the way to the front. That's the biggest complaint I have with the whole thing, is never enough wiring. So I'll add a little bit more to show you what the lighting actually looks like here in a second. This is daylight. They're actually a little whiter than this. Overall, pretty good look when you can't see the seams. So it finally got dark, and you can kind of see the two lines there. It looks like the left headlight is rotated down toward the left a little bit, the driver's side, and the right headlight looks to be even. Here's with the high beams on. Pretty good, nice wide pattern just on the gate there. I imagine I'm gonna have to tip them up just a little bit. I think they're down too low. Oh yeah, that's not even close. They need to be adjusted up quite a bit. That's high beams. That is pretty good. Back to low beam. Yeah, too low. All right, that's looking pretty good. That's where we went to cut off. Pretty clean cut off. Got the hot spot right where I want it in the middle. So we're gonna leave it like that. And there's with the high beam. Pretty good flood. Nice big hot in the middle. Thanks for watching the video. Hope it helped. Sorry if it was painful. Probably drug on due to the problems that I had, but hopefully I can help you avoid those same problems. Please subscribe and give it a like if you think you could.